Brilliant.
Okay, well, I think we're live now. So good evening, everyone, anyone who's watching. I'm Jason Smith, and I've got a guest with me today, Rob Linden. I'll let Rob talk about himself a little bit and explain who he is. So anyone who's joining us, we'll give people a few minutes to sort of come on if anyone wants to join us. We've got our first person there. We've got our first viewer online now. So if anyone's watching us, just do a share so we can get more people on. This video is going to be available afterwards anyway to watch, so there's no problem. But if you want to interact, then join us now. So we've got a couple of people on now. So so we're just going to talk today about Rob's experience with Reiki and working with Reiki. So okay, I think we'll kick off then, and people will just join us as we go along. So okay, so this is Rob Linden. He's a Reiki Master, and I'll just let Rob talk about who he is and his experience and his qualifications as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason, and thank you for having me on tonight. It's an absolute pleasure. So, as Jason said, I'm Rob Linden. I am a Reiki Master. Some people won't know what that means, and as we chat tonight, hopefully that'll become clear. And even going down to a more fundamental level, then I suspect that a lot of people don't even know what Reiki itself is. So we'll go through some of the explanation of that as we chat this evening. But in terms of me as an individual, and I'm sorry, I'm not used to looking at the camera. I keep looking at the picture of Jason on the thing. So if it don't look like I'm looking forwards, that's why. You'll also notice that I gesticulate a lot. Once I get going, my hands will be everywhere. So anyway, my background, going back 3.5 years since I was made redundant from Lloyd's banking group. I used to be an IT specialist, so you couldn't want for a more completely different kind of role in life from doing that to doing what I'm doing now currently. And I absolutely love working with Reiki. For me, Reiki is a super special energy. It's a very spiritual practice, and I just love working with it. I'm very passionate about it, and hopefully you'll see some of that passion unfurl tonight as we get to talk more about Reiki. So I've already said that I used to work for Lloyd's Banking Group. Before I finished working there, going back a while before that, I started to become interested in spiritual things. One of the first things that myself and my wife Liz looked at was transcendental meditation. And at the time, I looked at that because of the levels of stress that I was going through in work and in life. I'd suffered an awful lot with anxiety and depression, in common with so many other people as well. And I was seeking out something to help me. And the very first thing that we did do was to learn transcendental meditation. And that for me opened up, I guess, a doorway. And it then led on to finding Reiki further down the line. Now, the reason for me finding Reiki was that, unfortunate set of circumstances, my mother was elderly and she was suffering with cancer. But worse than that, really, was the dementia. She got 2 types of dementia. And for me, I'd lost my mum maybe about 18 months before she passed. But one of the positives that came out of all of that experience was that she was under the care of Sue Ryder hospices in Leeds, a wonderful group of people. And because myself and my wife were really primary carers for my mum, they offered us a set of complementary therapies. And on the list were the usual sort of things like massage and reflexology and a few other things that we were familiar with. And then right at the bottom of the list was Reiki. And I thought, this is something, I was always open-minded to try different things. I'd heard of Reiki, but I had no idea what it was. So I thought, I'm going to give this a whirl and see what happens. And the first Reiki session, the lovely lady that did the Reiki for me, she just said about it being an energy-based thing, and that the energy would come through and help me to feel nice and relaxed and calm. which was really beneficial because at that time I was off work with stress. And so I had this Reiki session. It was really beautiful. And it helped me to just go to a place of relaxation that I wouldn't have been able to go to otherwise. And then a week later, I went back expecting pretty much the same kind of deal. But what I got was so unexpected. The force of the energy that came through me. This lady put her hands on my head, and I was laying down on the treatment table. And I can't describe it in proper words, but I can use an analogy to help you to understand. If you imagine standing in a hot shower and the water running down your head and then down your body and going down like that. And this is what I was feeling, this wave of intense energy, the warmth coming down my body. And it was incredible. And I just burst out and said, wow. I was just taken completely aback. A conversation then ensued. And basically, there was no two ways about it. I was going to learn how to do Reiki at that point. I had no idea at that point where it was going to take me, but that's basically was the beginning of my journey with Reiki. And so I just basically looked at every opportunity to learn Reiki then. So within a few months of my mum passing, I'd done my Reiki level 1, which is the introduction really to the energy. And then only a few months later, I'd done Reiki level 2. But in the meantime, I found other people who were doing Reiki, and I had attunements to other types of Reiki as well. And then by the following January, so that was, I did my level 1 in the July. By the following January, I would already become a Reiki master. But that point, there was no intention of me being a teacher. That wasn't why I was following the Reiki. I was following it because of how the energy was working with me, how it was opening me up as an individual, and just because I enjoyed working with the energy so much. And then the rest of it kind of just, I went mad looking for all sorts of different types of Reiki to get my hands on, to experience the Reiki. And I eventually came across this thing called Holy Fire Reiki. And when I did the course for that, which was a master level course, I went down to Glastonbury. It was residential in Glastonbury for 5 days. And then one of those days we went to Stonehenge, and with Holy Fire Reiki, we have what's called ignitions. And we had one of the ignitions in Stonehenge, which was out of this world. It was just awesome. You know, the whole experience, the whole week was fantastic. And then the interesting thing was, Jason, that at the end of that, when I came back, it was like, although it was called Holy Fire Reiki, it put the fire out in terms of me trying all of these different types of Reiki.
Right, I found the right one for you then.
That's it. It's like I'd come home to it, you know. And so that's going back, I always get mixed up about this. It's about 2.5 years ago now, is that. Mm. So in comparison with a lot of Reiki masters, I'm still very new kid on the block. But it's my whole life, you know, is Reiki. Everything that I do revolves around it. I'm using the energy all of the time, you know, basically. And since then, whilst it's put the fire out for finding other types of Reiki, I have done other types of energy healing that I've learnt about. So I'm still sort of developing myself. Again, in keeping with any kind of spiritual development work, it never ends, does it? You know?
No. One thing leads to another, doesn't it? Before you know it, you're down a huge rabbit hole, aren't you? Really?
That's it. Yeah, in a rabbit warren with all of these different little avenues to explore, and yeah, for sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That, you know, I mean, your story's interesting because I've met you before, but I don't know much about you, but I think your story is a lot of people can resonate with that, you know, because I mean, certainly for myself, I came from a corporate background, and then I kind of completely walked out of a decent job and stuff, and into sort of the alternative health thing. So I can certainly understand that, and I've heard a lot of people that I know were in this field have done the same thing. They've found that they sort of got into that environment. They're not really happy. You know, they're not really getting anything out of it. They feel like they're not making a difference. And then, you know, they're coming into this field now, which is a completely different world, isn't it, as well, you see?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I was still working at Lloyd's, I think because my spiritual path had started in earnest, and my eyes were starting to open. And this is no disrespect to Lloyd's, but the things I were doing there, it just seemed empty, you know. And I knew something else I should be doing. I didn't know what at that time. I just knew this wasn't the place for me anymore. And so that the motivation to leave was, you know, through the roof, really. And I was very fortunate then, within a few months of that sort of realization coming through, I was made redundant. I'd been there for 25 plus years, and I got a really good payout. So it meant that I had a cushion to come out of work.
And then good. Yeah, you need that, don't you, though, really?
For sure, yeah. And certainly for me, it was what I needed. And what I didn't realise as well is just how burnt out I was as an individual. I had this crazy notion that I finished work in the May. I thought by the end of the year, I'll have my Reiki practice up and running as a Reiki practitioner, you know, seeing clients. But there was no way. I just wasn't fit for that. I needed to do a lot of self-healing before I would have been ready for that. And again, because it's so spiritual, the universe has just gradually revealed to me where I should be. And so the thing that myself and my wife are doing just now, we opened up a small wellness centre in Linden near Halifax. Right. Beginning of the year. Ironically, about 6 weeks before lockdown took hold. So we're almost not so much really, no. But again, there's always lessons to be learned in these things. We just started.
Give you a chance to get everything in its place, though, as well, doesn't it? So there's always opportunities there, isn't there, I suppose. Absolutely,
yeah, definitely. And the lockdowns being an enforced time of rest and reflex. I've forgotten the word I'm looking for.
Reflection.
Yeah, reflection on life, etc. So yeah, it has been beneficial. Despite all of the other weird, I think the biggest issue with the lockdown is we just didn't expect it. We'd never lived through anything like that before. It's been
it was something completely new, wasn't it? You see, we've never, we've had, I can't remember. Obviously, you can't either. In my life, I can't remember anything in our lifetime that's happened like this before.
No, really. Not at all. Yeah, so, it's unprecedented.
It's been a bit of a challenge, and when you said about leaving Lloyd's, as I say, I worked at a big multinational company, and to me it was just a number feeding the sort of the machine. And it was a case of, for me, and I suppose for you maybe as well, it was a case of, do I stay here and what was quite good money actually, or do I go and do something where that I'm more passionate about and that I can make a difference. And to be honest, I've not regretted it one day actually, since I did it. And I think a lot of people who watch this and are in the same boat have done the same thing. And I don't know anyone who's regretted making this move, to be honest, because I think it's for your physical and mental health. I think it's a no-brainer actually.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, for sure. And again, that really touches upon my reason for leaving, and I'm sure you'll agree with that. I because of what I'd gone through and where the corporate life had taken me, and life in general, it wasn't just the corporate life, but I'd struggled so much with anxiety and depression that I just wanted to help people. I wanted to be able to help people in the place that I was in, and so that they too could move out of that. And so again, maybe that takes me on to thinking about Reiki more in general, because as I see it, as people start to learn about Reiki and they go through the Reiki Level 1 course, it can be a spiritual gateway for them. It can start to help them to open up in ways that they've not done before. A lot of spiritual things are intangible, and we can talk about them all day long. We can get excited talking about them, but until you can actually feel something that of a spiritual nature, which you can do with Reiki, then suddenly it's wow. Actually, then that starts to make sense, and other things start to fall into place.
100%, it's like I think that what you said there is really important. It's a kind of a gateway, isn't it? All these energy forms or energy work. I think it's a gateway, isn't it, to a spiritual sort of path or life, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my understanding now is far advanced in what it was back then. What I understand now is that essentially when we get a Reiki attunement, when we're opened up to the Reiki energy, then it basically, it enhances our connection to spirit. And this is where the gateway comes from. You know, that basically we're supported in spirit. We can get a lot of wisdom from spirit, and the Reiki just helps us to start to tap into that. It's like anything else. The more that we put into it effort-wise, then the more that we can get out of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah. I think no, I'll talk about my. I'm not an expert like yourself, so I think this is an interesting conversation to have, because I've done sort of healing for, I'd say, for most of my life, really, just hands-on healing. So it's just, for me, it's been a natural thing. I have had a little bit of experience in Reiki, so I've got the Reiki one in Usui Reiki. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. You'll tell me if it isn't. But what I'd like to ask you, and what probably other people are wondering as well, is there are different forms of Reiki. So you've got the Usui Reiki, you've got the Holy Fire Reiki, which you mentioned. You've got angelic Reiki as well, I believe. I'm just kind of interested to know what the difference is. Is there any difference, or is it just a, is it just a label? Is the difference? Are we sort of channeling in these energies from somewhere different? And so that's kind of like what I'd want to ask, really, if you kind of got any knowledge on that, really.
Yeah, well, I'll do my very best, Jason. Again, it's not a kind of black and white answer to the question that I'm going to give you. And we could spend hours just talking about this one topic. But essentially, so going back to your experiences in life, what I find, because I meet an awful lot of people in what I'm doing, I meet a lot of students because I teach Reiki as well. And there's so many people that have this natural healing ability that they've kind of had all their life. They've not known where it's come from. And as I see it, it's a gift that people are born with. And I do come across an awful lot of people. And one of the sort of common things that these kind of individuals experience, from my experience when I've spoken to them, is that when they do the healing work, energy is passing through them. But what tends to happen is that they're drawing on their own energy supply. And so they can do energy healing for a while, and then that might leave them feeling really tired. Whereas with Reiki, so this is the first step. With Reiki, what happens is when you get a Reiki attunement, then it opens up your energy channels within your body so that the energy can flow through. Because, so you touched upon this. You said, where does the energy come from? Well, I genuinely believe that the Reiki energy it's around us at all times. It's around us. It's a little bit like, to use the analogy of the old-fashioned radio sets with the dial. Where it goes across the thing. And as you do that, you're tuning in to a station. So you might tune into Radio 2, Radio 1, or Classic FM or whatever. You've not created the radio station when you get the dial to that particular point. The station was already there. What you're doing is you're just sort of tuning into it. And so in Reiki terms, that's where we get this term attunement from, because you're tuning into something that's already there. So that's how I see things in basic terms. And Usui Reiki was one of the first forms of Reiki that had been taught widely. I mean, the history of that goes back to early last century, when Mikao Usui, that's where it gets its name from, started teaching Reiki in Japan. Again, there's a whole story behind how he came to have the Reiki, but he basically opened up this school of Reiki for his students, and he started teaching Reiki to these people for their own healing and for their own self-development. There wasn't really a focus on helping other people. But of course, as you heal yourself as an individual, then you heal everybody around you, because of, as you make yourself more healthy, if you like, mentally, spiritually, etc., then that helps the people you come into contact with. So even though it wasn't teaching...
I've heard something, Rob, and I don't know, you better tell me if this is true or not. I was told that our healing, our energies or our energy fields extend for 6 feet or 6 meters? I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure.
Again, you get different.
I mean, they expand out obviously from our body, though, don't they? So there'll be an impact on other people, won't there? Then, like you say, in that respect.
Yes, for sure. And again, there's no straightforward answer to that one, Jason. The general rule of thumb is that people talk about having a diameter of about 3 meters or something like that going outwards from yourself. So this is one of the things that we miss when we're in lockdown. Because when we're not physically with other people in their company, then our energy fields are not overlapping with those people who you know, our friends and relatives, etc., that we're being separated from. And there's a level of communication that happens through those that we're unaware of.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff is important. And you're absolutely right. As we heal ourselves, it's not just within the physical body, it's the energy field that then spreads outwards. Now, as I said, it's not a black and white answer to this, because your primary sort of aura that surrounds you might go out so far. But as we start doing things, you know, we start working with energy, then that aura can expand almost indefinitely. So again, we could spend hours just talking about that kind of thing.
It's interesting. I think something that I found interesting, this is just a bit of just something that I noticed. The government, government, these government restrictions, one of them is that you stay 6 feet apart, and 6 feet is supposed to be. And as I say, I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if you can prove it, but a lot of the spiritual people say that your energy field extends 6 feet from your body. Okay. So I think, you know, I'm not saying this has been done in any way on purpose, but obviously that's disconnecting people from from the energies. And another thing that I'd just like that's kind of come to me as well. You talk about that the energy comes from around us. So would that be something similar to what sort of Nikola Tesla was sort of connecting to them? Is that you think, is he, or he'll be obviously on a different wavelength, because these were to power, his was sort of an energy to power equipment. But the principle's the same, though, I suppose, isn't it? That you're taking energy from around, aren't you, I suppose?
I think we need to have a series of these sessions, Jason, to be able to get through all of this.
Yeah, there's a lot of perspective too on, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm kind of very aware of Tesla's work and great admiration for what he did. Also aware, and a lot of people are not, that a lot of what he was doing was channeled from spirit. He was bringing down some of his inspiration, well, maybe all of it from spirit, actually. And one of the things is that, so when I'm teaching, I often talk about quantum physics. I don't go into a huge level of detail with quantum physics, but it definitely relates both to what Tesla was doing and how Reiki works as well. And the takeaway headlines from quantum physics is that everything is energy. This is something that Einstein made clear as well, not just in his famous equation, but he said this many times as well. At the end of the day, everything, including ourselves, the world that we live in, is energy-based. And so Tesla was tapping in to the fabric of the universe, and so too does Reiki. That the Reiki energy flows through that same fabric of the universe. So there's definitely a relationship there, but I don't have the knowledge to be able to say how similar it was.
Anyway. I just think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that these, obviously, we're talking about Tesla. We're talking about hundreds of years ago, when he was knocking around. But but it's the same story, isn't it, that we're hearing from spirit people who you class him as a scientist, wouldn't you? But the spiritual people on the other side, but they're sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, really, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And I think you look at a lot of very successful people, and they're also tapping into that same source as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to your question, Jason, because we didn't get very far into it.
We're going off track.
Yeah, which is good. When I'm teaching, I often get called Mr. Tangent, because I do go off on so many different tangents.
I'm the same, so we've got no chance.
So anyway, what was I going to say? So Usui started teaching Reiki back in the 1920s. And to be honest, up until probably about the turn of this century, then Usui Reiki was by far the most predominant Reiki that was being taught on the planet. And then it was around about mid-90s that newer forms of Reiki started to appear. So one of the other forms of Reiki that I've learned is called Karuna Reiki.
I've not heard of that one. I've not heard of that one, actually.
But it's lovely. I mean, you'll not forget this when I finish telling you it, hopefully. Karuna is a Sanskrit word, one of the ancient languages, and it basically means compassion, or compassionate action, or even compassion in action. And so, again, what a fitting description for a form of Reiki to be able to bring this compassionate energy through to people. And as I see it, Reiki energy, right, I might need to backpedal a little bit. I think of Reiki as being very much akin to light. You know, so that if we think about the visible light spectrum that we have, one of the experiments that they did quite some time ago was they used a prism, and they shone white light in there, and at the other side we got the rainbow of colours coming out of the prism. So we know that, you know, scientifically speaking, white light is made up of all of these other colours which are part of what we think of as the rainbow. So we've got the red, the orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet. And again, from a scientific perspective, what we find is that the lowest part of that spectrum, which is red, has a lower vibration or frequency than the violet light at the top end of the spectrum. And of course, that's not the end of the picture, is it? Because we know that we've got below red, we've got infrared, above violet, we've got ultraviolet. These are things that we can't see with our naked eye, but we know that they're there because of science research. And as I see it, Reiki is exactly the same. It belongs on a spectrum, but it's so high up that spectrum that we can't see it, obviously, and we don't have the equipment to be able to monitor it. Again, there's a lot I could talk about there. So where people are doing modern testing and scientific testing around Reiki, what they can start to observe, for instance, is the effects that it has on the electromagnetic spectrum around our body. So they can see that quite clearly because we can measure that. Now, I believe that Reiki is electromagnetic in the way that we think of the electricity that comes through the home, but it is on the same sort of spectrum of energy, just so far afield. Now, there is a reason I'm telling you all this. And so if you look at the Usui Reiki, then Usui Reiki basically is part of a spectrum, okay? And if you start to break that spectrum down, as we learn when we're teaching Reiki or when we're learning Reiki, the lower end of the spectrum is good for physical healing. The higher end of the spectrum is good for mental, emotional and spiritual healing that needs to be done. Okay. But then some of these newer forms of Reiki, as I see, are like adding on to the top of the spectrum that was already there in the Usui Reiki. So it started to build upon that. And really, these newer forms of Reiki, one of the things that differentiates them from Usui is that they tap into different frequencies of energy that weren't previously available, and typically, again, I can't go into a huge amount of detail here, but if you tap into one of these types of energy, it's good for a specific type of healing.
I see. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. We'll just take a 30 seconds break there, Rob, because I just want to say to everyone, if you're watching this feed, if you can just share it out, because it just gets it out to a wider range of people. So just give us a share. We can see your comments, so if you want to comment, throw a comment to us. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A at the end if we've got time, and if we're not, if we want to do that anyway. So if you've got any interesting questions for Rob, just put them on the text or on the comments, and we'll come back to you towards the end anyway. So just keep sharing us out to everyone. So okay, an interesting thing that you mentioned there, Rob, was about the colour spectrum. Obviously the red being the base colour, the physical colour, and that corresponds obviously to the chakras as well, doesn't it? You see, because you've got your base chakra red in it as well. So all these things kind of connect in, don't they? So when you said about the energies that you're channeling in from the Reiki, are these all kind of, I had to say this, but would you class them as more spiritual energies and physical energies, or is it a bit of a mix? Is it a bit of a mix then?
Well, again, as you develop down your Reiki path, you can pick and choose which types of energy you want to work with. Yeah. Right. And again, as you develop more and more spiritually and with your Reiki, then you become more intuitive, and you kind of just know when to call on the individual types of Reiki that are going to flow through. But I would describe it all as being spiritual energy. But I know what you were saying. You're talking about energy that's specifically good for the physical healing side of things. Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's really interesting. And now I'll just again, something's just come to me, so I'm gonna put it out there and just see if you've had an experience like this. This is not this is someone that I know well, who's done healing for a long time, and this is just a kind of a bit of a, for people watching, this is just a bit of an evidence, because a lot of people they can't see the evidence, can you really? No. But they did healing regularly, and they had a window at the side of them where they're doing the healing, and as they were doing the healing, they'd shake out the energy. I don't know if this is a common thing that people do, but I do it as well. So you shake out when you're doing the healing, you shake it out, and they used to put their hand outside and shake out the energy, or the I don't know what it would be, the negative energy, or whatever energy. And they used to do it outside of the window, and outside the window there was plants and stuff, and they used to do this quite regularly, so on a weekly basis. And then what they discovered was, outside of the house, just outside the window, where there were I think there were flowers or vegetation, whatever it was, but where they were flipping out the energy, which they were, as they was drawing the energy out of people, or the illness out of people, it was all that area around the vegetation was all dead. So just that. So I think that's an interesting kind of, because people always say, I don't, you give me some evidence. Well, I think the best evidence is to try it yourself, but I think that's a good example of, when you draw the negative energy out and you flick it out or whatever, or you throw it out, that was a great evidence of, the fact that nothing grew in this area. So obviously this, whether it was dead energy or whatever. So have you ever and is that something that you've experienced or seen or anything?
Right, okay, so, and then this in no way is meant as a judgmental thing whatsoever, but that really is not particularly good practice, because for the reasons that you've just stated, that that you are passing on that negative energy, and by flicking it outside the window, it's then going into an environment where it's not ideal. So there are techniques that you can use to sort of transmute that energy, essentially.
Right,
the way
right.
The energy is transmuted, so it's taken care of rather than it kind of just being dumped. Because that's it. I wouldn't view that as best practice, but it does demonstrate, like you say, that there's something very tangible going on there. And then to sort of flip that on its head, in the early days when I'd learned Reiki, one of the Reiki meditations that I was doing during the night. I was having terrible problems sleeping back then. And I'd wake up, and so instead of just sort of tossing and turning for 2 or 3 hours, I thought, right, I might as well do some meditation now. So I started doing that. And this particular one, I was breathing in Reiki energy and then pushing the energy back out of my body. And I was doing this around my house, basically, if you like, healing and purifying the house. Right. But then I started doing this to the garden as well. And I'd been doing this for a few months. And then it came to about this time of year, and it suddenly struck me that none of the trees and stuff in our garden had lost any of the leaves. That it was still really green and verdant, and it hit me, that it was doing so well because of the Reiki energy. Again, people who might just dismiss that, but they're little evidences, aren't they, all the way around. So.
Yeah, I think this is interesting for people, because people who haven't had these experiences will always kind of, always kind of, I want to see some evidence. And I mean, I had a particular instance, which you've probably had yourself, where this is when I was working in the corporate environment, where people just don't really believe in this sort of thing at all. And this particular lady had a really bad migraine, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go home," sort of thing. And I said, "Well, I could put my hands on your head and I could heal it in a few minutes." And she's like, "No, that's absolute nonsense. No way." Anyway, eventually she said she agreed to do it. I think just that she was really struggling. Anyway, I went in the kitchen and hands on the head. Within a couple of minutes, it had gone, and she was absolutely She was just gobsmacked. She was not a believer at all. So I think that's an example of, you know, I think the best way to sort of show someone something is to give them an experience, isn't it? I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, but they've got to be open to that, which thankfully that lady was. But that would have then changed the way that she thought about Reiki for the rest of her life, and potentially opened her up mentally to other spiritual ideas, which is for me a really important thing. Yeah, no, that's brilliant when that kind of stuff happens.
It's always good. But it's got to be. You've got to accept the offer, haven't you? Because I mean, if she'd have said no way, I'd rather have a migraine, rather collapse at home or whatever, or go to bed. That's fine. But you know, at least she said, let's give it. I don't believe in it, but let's give it a go. And you know, and so you know, whether she's a believer now or not, but she's had that. She knows now that something was happening there. You know, it was something was definitely happening because you know, she wasn't the kind of person to sort of, you know, if it wouldn't have worked, she would have told you it wouldn't have worked for sure. You know, so and on the you know, when you mentioned about obviously channeling in the energy, in relation, you know, you've obviously heard of like the Kalian photography, you know, where they can photograph auras and energies and stuff. Has that ever been anything like that ever been done with Reiki in that you're aware of?
I can't see why the same technology couldn't be used to sort of capture. I had a picture taken probably a couple of years ago, and around here was all purple. But it isn't it with my backdrop anyway. But, which purple is associated with a healing colour. And so people who do this kind of work, they tend to have that, you know, they'll have distinctive colours in their aura. This is one of the ways in which the aura works, and if we could see auras in daily life, it'd make a huge difference to how we interacted with other people, because immediately when you saw somebody, you'd know how well they were, you'd know what kind of mood that they were in, you know, and basically they wouldn't be able to lie because you'd see it in their aura immediately, all of those kind of things.
I mean, that'd be a good lie. That kind of be a good lie detector test in a way, wouldn't it? If you had any sort of politician in front of you, like, rather than a lie detector test, which you can get around lie detector tests, it's quite easy to do that actually. But you wouldn't be able to it wouldn't be as easy to get around an energy test, would it? Really?
I can't see it myself. I don't think you would be able to get around it, but because it's just that something that happens automatically. I guess maybe it could be you could train against it, but anyway, sorry. That's so another thing as well that just sort of come to me as well is in relation to auras. You know, you've seen some of these pictures where someone's had lost a limb or something. And when they photograph the aura still goes around where the arm would have been, or if it's a leaf or something, if the leaf's been cut, the aura still goes around where the leaf would be, which I find interesting as well. Yeah. Okay. So again, that to me that makes sense. We're getting a little bit deeper now, but my understanding of how our bodies are made up, we've got the physical body. And in different spiritual schools, you talk about different types of body, but within the physical body, we have an astral body, and the soul resides within that. So if you were to lose a physical limb, then the astral body wouldn't lose that limb. So that makes sense that the picture of the arm would still be intact at an energetic level, even though the physical arm was missing. So I mean, I've not seen those. That's right off the top of my head. But that to me would make sense, yeah. Yeah,
that makes sense to me. So you think that's probably the spiritual astral body? Then you think that, of the plant or the person? Because obviously it's the same. They're all living
absolutely.
Things, yeah. So that's really interesting. So in relation to the different types of Reiki, so you've got your Usui. Is it Karuna? Did you say? Is it called
Karuna Reiki? Yeah.
Right. Okay. You've got your Holy Fire and your Angelic. So if somebody wanted to, I mean, we've got people watching us now and people who are watching this video going forward as well. So if someone's interested in Reiki, you know, there's all these different ones out there. Is it literally a case of, you know, whichever one kind of jumps out at you? Is it like, most spiritual things, are you going to be attracted to something, or is one certain one going to be better for a certain person? Is there a way to do that, or is it just what you're drawn to though? Is it what we say?
I think at the end of the day, it's what you were drawn to.
Yeah.
Again, spiritual path is very individual, and the ideal place to be in is one where we follow our intuition. So that, as you've described, is basically what you feel drawn to. But in a sense, the Usui Reiki is kind of like a foundation for everything else. So Reiki is a good place to start, and then see where your journey takes you to. So for some people, it may be something like Holy Fire, or it could be Angelic Reiki. Some people are quite at home with Reiki, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful energy, and they may then just stay with that. Like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But it's down to each of the individual.
Would you recommend somebody going to the Usui Reiki initially then, would you? Or is it just a case of you would recommend that, would you, as initial, as a start?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when I teach people, I always teach Usui Reiki first. So we do Usui Reiki levels 1 and 2 before people could then be introduced to the Holy Fire Reiki, which is really only a master level. There is no sort of practitioner level. There's no beginner level. Holy Fire, you've got to have that foundation first before you do that. Whereas something like Angelic Reiki is different. You can go in straight at the sort of learning Angelic Reiki at the base level and then become a practitioner. I think there are 4 levels. Not an expert actually with Angelic Reiki, but the principles are, and again, this might be a leap of faith for people listening, is that you are guided by angels when you're doing the Angelic Reiki.
Right.
That's what makes that special.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is from my personal point of view, and I've learned a lot today from you, because my knowledge of Reiki is quite limited, but I've always been drawn to Holy Fire Reiki, which hence the reason for my video today looking like orange fire, because that's just what I like. So I don't know what that means, or particularly, but that's kind of personally that's what I'm drawn to. So probably that might be my path at some stage. I don't know. So is that a particular type of energy, or a particular level, or a particular is there anything specific in relation to the Holy Fire?
Oh, again, where do we start with that one? Yes, it is a very specific question. It's a very powerful type of energy. It's very, very strong. If you think about fire in its positive sense, it can be very destructive as well, of course. But in a positive sense, fire can be used for cleansing and healing, and the Holy Fire does exactly that. William Lee Rand was the guy who channeled the Holy Fire Reiki. And one of the things he talks about it being good at is removing, and it's a Japanese term called Byoki, which essentially means negative energy, negative ki. So negative ki is negative energy. So it comes along and it basically is capable of burning away negative energy and removing it. And negative energy, as we were talking earlier with the experience of the person throwing the energy out the window and it killing the plant. We remove negative energy from somebody's body, from their aura, etc., which then allows the body to heal itself. And so, the Holy Fire is basically a very powerful way of enabling that to happen. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's kind of where I'm drawn in relation to the Reiki, I think. So, so that's really interesting.
This is a sales plug coming in. You'll have to come to one of my classes then and learn.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice. If we can open up the world at some stage, it'd be nice to get back to some kind of normality, really. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit as we go along about some different. I've got a few little Reiki stories as well. I've kind of dabbled with Reiki a few times, but it's never kind of come off for whatever reason. So probably not the right time, I suppose. But that's certainly the road that I'm kind of wanting to go down, I think, at some stage. So so that's interesting. So we'll just take another little quick break again. So we've got 45 minutes. So again, we've got some comments coming in now as well. So we'll probably save them till the end then, Rob, if you like.
Okay. I'm easy either way. Yeah.
Just because it keeps things, you know, a bit more structured, I suppose. But we've got a lot of people sort of joining us and giving us a few little comments and things. So we won't forget about you. We'll come back to you. So again, just give us a share again, sort of like spread the word, spread the energy and things, and you know, and we'll just carry on as long as we're, you know, as long as it's interesting, as long as we've got something interesting to say, I suppose, really. So next thing I want to talk about is you know, unless we've kind of missed anything really, but just, you know, obviously we've worked with Reiki for quite a long time, number of years. You know, have you got any interesting sort of stories around, you know, when you've been teaching, or people who you've met, or just energy healing sort of things that you've come across? So, you know, I've got a couple of things, but I just wanted to throw it out to you first and see if there's anything you've got that might be anything that might be of interest to people really who've got an interest.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that we do with Holy Fire Reiki, we have like a toolkit, if you like. We have something called a Holy Fire Reiki experience. And there are a number of these experiences that are good for different types of healing. They're akin in some ways to having a Reiki session. But one of the things with the Holy Fire experience is that I can do this for a group of people. And as far as I'm aware, there's no kind of limit to the size of the group of people I could do this for. And going back, it was one of the first times I've done this in public. So it was maybe 2.5 years ago or something like that. And I was doing one of these experiences for a group of people. It was an over 50s group in Sowerby Bridge. And you just don't know what's going to happen in these groups, how people are going to receive the energy, how people are going to receive me as an individual, talking about this spiritual practice and about energy and things like that. And within that group of people, the way that the experience works is that you do a brief guided meditation up front and then talking them through that, essentially to help people to relax into readiness for the energy to come. And then the energy comes down upon the group. And afterwards, there's one lady there who said, I'd not felt as relaxed in years. And she said literally years, you know, that she'd not had that level of relaxation. So that was a wonderful bit of feedback. But then there were a few other people that piped up. And again, people might not know what this means from a spiritual perspective. But one lady, and this is just like Joe Public, you know, it wasn't people who were on a spiritual path per se. And she said that she'd seen unicorns flying around. Wow. Well, from a spiritual perspective, unicorns are really high energetic beings. Right. So again, at that time, I didn't understand myself actually, and I've learned since, you know. But again, it just tapping into, you just don't know the people's spiritual backgrounds, etc. Another lady said then that when I was doing the guided meditation, she was hearing the words that I was saying before I said them. So again, these are sort of experiences. That's just one group of people there that were receiving this energy through an experience. Obviously, I do. I practice my Reiki with paying clients on a regular basis when I'm not in lockdown. Although there's another story we can look at as well, because of course we don't have to do Reiki face to face. We can use distance Reiki. Yeah. So I would like to come back to that, please, Jason. Yeah,
definitely. I'd like to talk about that.
And so one of the wonderful things, it's like you said about putting your hands on that lady's head, and she got the migraine, and within minutes that having gone and passed, and knowing what migraines are like, she could have been bad for a few days if you hadn't have done that. And yet the energy's just, and again, I've had very similar experiences myself that have lifted things like that. You get people that will come to you with a specific issue, and they come onto your treatment table. You do a set of Reiki for them, and at the end of it, it doesn't just lift that, but it might lift a number of things that person from. Obviously, we can't guarantee that kind of outcome for everyone, but because there are a lot of reasons why sometimes things won't shift.
That's right.
Yeah, no. again, there's just so many different things. It's hard to sort of, what would have been special to me going back quite some time ago is no longer. It's more kind of ordinary run of the mill. So it doesn't tend to stand out in my mind like it would have done, when it first started happening. What is really sort of reaching me just now, and especially when I do the training for Reiki Masters, is the experience that people are having during the master classes are phenomenal. And as I see it, the energy around the planet is shifting in a very positive way in one sense. I know there's such a lot of negativity just now because of everything that's been going on throughout the year, but there's also some very strong energy coming into the planet. And as I see it, I'm seeing Reiki students doing things far more quickly than they would have done a decade ago, and even just a handful of years ago. I think people are doing things really, really quickly. They're picking stuff up really quickly. They're doing things that would have taken a long time to develop previously. So those kind of things stand out for me. And again, it's difficult, but when we're doing the Holy Fire Masterclass, some of the visions that people are having as well are absolutely phenomenal.
That's interesting. That's interesting to me. That so so when when you're doing the attunement or however you do, are people receiving? It's like channeling information as well. Then would that be fair to say then?
Well, again, it's like what we were talking about before. As we get the Reiki and it opens up these channels to spirit, then the communication's coming from spirit, and it's that as these channels are being opened for them, then it basically helps them to tap into that. Now, I must put a caveat on this, Jason, because we are all individuals, and not everybody has that kind of highly visual experience. For a lot of people, it can just be the sensations of the energy. To be honest, I'm very much like that. I am more clairsentient than I am clairvoyant or clairaudient. And so I don't tend to see I do sometimes, and I can't switch it on or off. I just take it when I can. But so I can't guarantee that somebody came to me for a Holy Fire Reiki Masterclass that they would get some of these phenomenal experiences. But what is clear is that is ramping up again. So for me, that's one of the most exciting things that I'm seeing, that people are really having these extraordinary experiences. And as well, after they go away from the course, the people who apply themselves to it, they're having some phenomenal experiences with the healing as well. It really does open up the energy channels.
Yeah. So in relation to the energies that you're seeing now, you certainly think that there's a higher energy coming down, or a different sort of energy, do you think, at the moment? Would you say that?
I'm sure that we're moving into times. Again, this is a deep subject, and we don't have time, and I wouldn't be able to explain it properly in this sort of forum. But the planet is opening up to higher energy, and that energy is coming in, and so it's there for anybody that is wanting to develop spiritually. Is there for people to tap into, and people are doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, it's just you've got to just tuning into the right channel, really, isn't it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And people are at different levels, aren't they, as well? So,
Yeah.
So, no, that's really interesting, Rob. We mentioned, we touched on a bit earlier about, this is something that I'm interested in as well, personally. The distant healing as well.
Yes.
So obviously this is something that you can do through Reiki. Is that correct? Well, you just talk about how that works and everything, really.
Gladly, I will do so. So you mentioned about Tesla a little while back, and one of the things that he was working on just before he died was this ability to actually transmit electricity wirelessly from one place to another. So instead of having to have pylons and wires and everything to be able to transfer that, he figured out a way of being able to transfer the energy wirelessly through the air, for want of a better description. And Reiki can work in exactly the same way. Now, I'm going to, it's a little bit of a leap of faith, is this one, but going back to the quantum physics, one of the experiments that they did in quantum physics was called entanglement. And what they proved, or they've shown, is that they got two particles, and they took them about 3 miles apart. They observed both particles and then started to perform experiments on one particle. And what they did is they observed that the other particle was reacting as though it was the primary particle. Okay.
Right.
And so what this theory of entanglement really tells us is that going back to the beginning of the universe, all of the energy, the whole of the universe was compressed into such a tiny space that everything was basically interrelated. And then after the Big Bang, all that energy came out, then essentially it maintained the connection.
Right.
Okay. And so I think Reiki really is tapping into the ability to be able to do exactly the same thing. So we can do Reiki for somebody. There's a specific technique to do it. And we do Reiki. I can do it within my own home, and I've done it for people at the other side of the world, for people all over the earth, and it just works. Yeah, that kind of thing is kind of like a matter of faith, knowing that it's going to work. And to start with, I thought, yeah, right, go on then. And so I coming from a technical background, I set myself up so that I could do certain experiments with it. So my stepdaughter, Mel, she was in uni. So we arranged a specific time at night where I'd send the energy so that she could then tell me afterwards if she felt anything. And she was able to describe what I'd done, you know, where the energy had gone and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of the first affirmations for me that this was working in the way that I'd been told it would. Going back, a few months after that, I spent some time with a guy in India who was described as being a grand Reiki master. And at one point he did an attunement for me. And he said, I'm touching your crown, I'm, going down my body. And as he said, I'm putting my hand on your heart. And I swear I could feel the outline of his hand. And it wasn't just because it was a proper physical thing. And I think by that time I was sold, that this Reiki thing is definitely, I think. And then since then, of course, I've done so much with it that there's just no doubt within my mind that it works. And actually, this is going to sound a bit strange, but for me, I think that distant Reiki is probably more effective than when I've got somebody in front of me. I can't explain that. Wow. Yeah,
that's surprising, actually. So, why do you think that is then?
I think that for me, it's a mental thing. That while I've got a person in front of me, I'm partially mentally divided. That I've got the awareness that this person's here. I need to make sure I'm not doing anything that might disturb them, all that kind of stuff. Whereas when they're not there physically in front of me, then my mind's completely free.
More focused, maybe.
Or more relaxed. I think it probably comes down to being more relaxed because, again, the more relaxed you are when you're doing Reiki or receiving it, then it's going to be more effective.
That's interesting. Another thing as well that I've kind of heard, and I've sort of experienced myself a little bit. If you're doing Reiki yourself, obviously you're channeling in the energy, aren't you? So you're giving yourself a bit of a healing at the same time, aren't you? Then
absolutely, yeah. Yes, definitely, yeah. That again, some people say that sort of like 10% of the Reiki is coming through you for you. Or something like that. I don't know that there's a specific percentage of it, but one of the things for sure is it's an incredibly relaxing thing to do for somebody else, because as that energy channels through you, then you get the benefits of the energy as well and the calm, and it fills the room that you're working in as well. When I first started practicing, we had a dog that we've sadly lost a couple of years back, but she would scratch at the door. She'd just come and sit next to the table. That was all she was bothered about, and she'd just sit in the energy, and she'd just enjoy it. She knew when I was doing the Reiki, she'd come in specific and enjoy it. Yeah. Again, they can't make it up. Then to them it's very difficult. It's it wasn't like
they've got a lot more keener senses than us in some ways as well, haven't they?
Definitely, yeah. Well, can I tell you a story going back to what you were asking before about different experiences around Reiki? I was out walking the dogs, fairly local to where we live, and we were walking up through fields, and we came across a paddock where there were a couple of horses in there, one of the horses was interested and sort of came up to within maybe about 10-15 foot of us. And then I just said to it, would you like some Reiki? At which point it walked right up to the fence and stopped. And so I put my hand on its forehead. Again, I was a little bit naive then from an energy perspective. And within about 10 seconds of me doing that, its eyes fluttering like this, you know, and I know that basically strong energy that does that. I can get that kind of, well, if it's really strong energy. And again, the horse can't make that up, can it?
No. I mean, the horse doesn't know that I mean, the horse can't probably speak English anyway, so it's probably not going to know what Reiki is anyway, is it really?
No, but I'm sure, like you said, they've got a sensitivity to. My intention would have been clear, even if it didn't understand the word. Right. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, I know for example, when I used to run the psychic development groups, my cat at the time always wanted to be involved, wanted to be in the middle of the room and stuff because of the energies, you see. So they certainly are tuned in certain different levels. And I mean, it's like, for example, they can see things that certainly we can't see because, you know, quite often you see your animals looking at things or, you know, standing back from things when there's nothing there. So, you know, their perception is certainly better than ours in some ways, isn't it, really?
Definitely, yeah. And again, as I see that, you know, like we were saying about before, the astral body, the energetic body that's within our physical body, we can't see that with the naked eye, and you can't x-ray it and see it from that kind of perspective, but it definitely exists. And again, another analogy that I'd use is like the radio waves that come through your house. You can't see them, but we know that they're there because when you switch the radio on, then that works. It picks up that signal. The same sort of thing with the mobile phones that we have. It's picking up a signal that we can't see. And so the things like angels, etc., that are maybe around us at all times, and animals can see those and pick those up where we can't necessarily.
That's in. So as an experienced Reiki healer like yourself, can you sense other kind of frequencies? So, like for example, can you sense sort of Wi-Fi and things like that if there's Wi-Fi on around you? Is that something
I'll be honest, Jason, I'm not that good at sensing these different types of energies. It's not one of the gifts that I've got, whereas a lot of the people that I teach, they do have that. But I think, and I know that you've gone to extreme lengths to make sure you've got your router and everything's hardwired, that there is no Wi-Fi. You switch that on. I'm guessing.
Definitely.
Yeah. And for sure, the energy can be sensed by people, and it doesn't feel particularly good, does it?
No. Well, I mean, as I say, everyone's different, and everyone's got different abilities, and some people, like you say, you know, are more auditory, more visual, or more feeling, aren't they, really? You know, and that's in every life, but that also applies to the spiritual matters as well, doesn't it? I think.
Yes, it does. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, certainly in relation to the Wi-Fi thing, I can sense if the Wi-Fi is on. I can sense it in my mind if it's on, and I've tested it myself. You know, in a sort of as scientific as you can get, really. And I can tell if Wi-Fi is on, and it does, and it does affect me thinking. So I don't do Wi-Fi at all. Now, everything is, you know, my house is full of cables basically. You know, so but I can tell if I go into somewhere that's got Wi-Fi, I can tell there's Wi-Fi there. Yeah, I can sense that. So it's some sort of, on some level anyway. So and my personal feeling is that it's not a positive. Well, basically, it's not a positive energy anyway. Really, it's quite quite a base energy, really. So and in relation to sort of, are you aware of? I don't know if this is a similar subject or if it's connected in some way. But are you aware of sort of binaural beats? Are you aware of?
Oh yes.
They tune into different frequencies. So I'm guessing that's obviously in an auditory way, but I'm guessing that's a very similar thing to Reiki, where you've got your different levels, haven't you?
Absolutely. As I see, all of this kind of stuff is all different types of frequency healing. It's using vibration of one sort or another. It's exactly the same thing with crystals as well. Got a lot of time for people doing crystal healing. Again, people are not necessarily aware of this, but each individual crystal resonates at a different frequency. There's a term within science called entrainment, and it basically says if you get two things, one that has a fixed resonance and one that has a variable resonance that can move about, and you put the fixed thing next to the variable one, what will happen is the variable one will match up to the resonance of the fixed frequency. And so this is why we can use things like crystals to bring chakras into alignment, because each of the chakras has a different level of vibration. And then, as you say, sound healing as well. As I see, it's all different ways of tapping into the same idea of using frequencies to bring about healing.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the binaural beats work exactly like that. You put one in one ear, one in the other ear, and it synchronizes to the medium, basically. And in that with that technique, you can effectively tune your vibration to any frequency you want, really. And different frequencies, as you say, do different things. So it's something that really there's not a lot of research out there, or there's not a lot of mainstream stuff out there, but it's something that's really not been utilized that much, has it, really, in healing anyway?
It's growing. You're right, in mainstream healing it's still, we're a way off. Although again, if we're just going back to the topic of Reiki, I know that there are people now, especially down in London, that are working within hospitals that are doing properly scientific testing to show how Reiki works alongside the traditional sort of healing modalities to bring about faster healing. And there's no two ways people recover more quickly, if they're receiving Reiki, which is good. Can I just add another little bit that's sort of related to that?
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah.
So there's a guy who runs a Reiki school in London, and he did a series of experiments with water. So this is another way of looking at the effects of Reiki on something physical that we can see that is tangible. And he did a series of tests with the same batch of tap water. They measured the level of purity of this tap water to start with, so they knew that the whole batch had a specific level. Let's say it was 4.2 on this particular scale. And the closer to zero it gets, the purer the water is. Okay, right. So that kind of the same. And so what he did is he got some of this water and they did Reiki in the water, just straightforward Reiki. Do you remember we were talking before about like the Usui Reiki and the different sort of types for physical healing, etc. But he didn't call in anything other than just straightforward Reiki. And he did that for about an hour on a piece of water, on this jug of water. And then they tested it again. And the purity index had dropped from 4.2 to about 3.2. So just an hour's worth of Reiki on the water had essentially a profound effect on the quality of the water. Now, let me ask you a question. What is your body made up of? Predominantly water. Yeah. So if, that's just one way of testing, the Reiki done for that water, and it had that effect within an hour. So you could look at that to a typical Reiki session. So if nothing else, it's helping your body in that perspective. It's making sort of atomic alignments, if you like, to purify water would essentially be what was happening. But the experiment... Sorry, Jason. Sorry, carry on, Rob. Sorry, carry on. Sorry. The experiment went on, actually, because what he then did is he drew energy in that was good for physical healing. And what he noticed then, after an hour's worth of the physical healing energy, is that the purity index had dropped from 4.2 to about 2.2. So it had moved 2 whole levels or percentage points or whatever they're called down the scale towards purity, which was, again, as I see it, absolutely phenomenal. He then did another experiment where he drew down energy which was more akin to the mental, emotional and spiritual type of healing, and he did that with the water. And as you might expect, because water kind of doesn't have those qualities, the water might do, but the purity index wasn't affected by it. So the improvement was seen as being less. Now, this is an interesting one. He did the same experiment again, but he used the distance technique for the water, even though it was in front of him, and coupled that with the physical healing energy. and the water improved to something like 1.2. That it would almost came back as pure water.
Wow.
So again, it just demonstrated all of these different principles around Reiki, and makes it so tangible. I love relating that to people, because, as you say, people can get their head around something like that. Whether they believe it or not, it's another thing. But I definitely believe it, and of course, from my practice, I know it can have that effect as well.
Well, it can be tested, as you've proved there. You can test the purity of water. It's not a difficult thing to do. So it can be tested. So it's there's a science. There's a bit of, you can do a little bit of science around this. There is a lot. In fact, there is a lot of science you can do around this if you really wanted to do it. If the establishment wanted to do it, there is a lot of science you could do around this to prove certainly a lot of aspects of it, isn't there? Really. Yes.
Something that I was going to do myself, actually, and I'd lined up about 30 volunteers to do this testing with, was to see the effect of brainwaves on, or the effect of Reiki on your brainwaves. Now, again, people understand a lot more about brainwaves now, and we know that in certain frequencies, it's not good for our health if it's sustained. And as we bring the frequencies down, essentially, that we're moving into a state of relaxation. And I think it's the third that when we get into there, that's where proper healing occurs. And so it comes as no surprise that when we do Reiki for people, and you measure these frequencies in your mind, these frequencies drop right down, and it puts you into a place where the healing can occur. So again, it's another evidence from yet a different perspective, but that's documented in various places around the world where people have done that kind of stuff. It's there for people to see if they want to.
Yeah, you're right, and you'll get a lot of people, you can't prove this kind of thing, but if you wanted to, you can do it. You've got what you've just mentioned. You've got the Kalian photography, which has been around a long time. That can measure energy fields and things like that. So these things that do exist, if you want to look at them. So mainstream science is catching up a little bit. I mean, Tesla was well ahead of the game, really, wasn't it? But they are catching up a little bit, really. So it's very interesting. I think
they're catching up enormously, actually. And there are some people out there, people like, and I always struggle with his name, Greg Braden. There's Joe Dispenza, and also the other guy is Bruce Lipton. And they kind of work as a almost. They've all come from a scientific background, and they're now sort of demonstrating the linkage between, especially quantum physics and spirituality. And there's a huge marry up there. And I think that the more that they do with the quantum physics, it's undeniable that they're starting to prove what people have been doing for millennia from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, a lot of people might think that healing and energy is a bit of a boring subject, but I think it's one of the most interesting subjects you can get. Actually, I think it's fascinating, really. So, I mean, shall I throw out one of my experiences with Reiki, Rob, and you can give me some feedback on it as well, if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
Just to kind of put it out there, because this is, I suppose you can class it as a bit of a scary story, I suppose, on Reiki. This is going back a few years now, and I've always been interested in Reiki anyway, so I wanted to get attuned. So I went to see this particular lady. She was recommended for some reason, and as we turned up, it felt from the beginning a little bit strange, and it turned out that this lady was a bit sort of, I'd say, like, let's say, a dark energy anyway. So we had she gave us a crystal to hold, and put a crystal in the hand, and it's like this, and it was like a milky coloured crystal. I'll remember the name probably. And when I put it in the hand, it was like the crystal was melting. So that was a bit of a strange thing. It was myself and another person having an attunement on this particular day, and the lady was doing this. I didn't know what Reiki was at this stage, so I didn't really know it, but she was obviously channeling in this energy, but it wasn't particularly good energy. It turned out it was quite dark energy, so I don't know what this lady was trying to do, whether it was some sort of ritual or whatever. But she was she was allegedly a Reiki master anyway, but she was channeling in this energy, this quite dark energy. And as the time went on, I was picking up, because I'm quite sensitive with energy, I was picking up this is not really that great. So I was putting out kind of a lot of positive energy and sort of, putting a bit of a protection on, I suppose. And same as the person who was with me. So there was two of us in this room. This one was channeling this energy. And she started to sweat, the lady, the Reiki lady, she started to quite sweat and she started to go quite lightheaded. Anyway, eventually, to cut a long story short, she sort of ran out of the room, and then came back in a few minutes later. I can't do this. It's not working. And then it ended up breaking off the session. We never got our certificates in the end, and we ended up leaving. So this lady was channeling in dark energy. But the reason why I'm kind of mentioning it on here is because she was quite clearly, and both myself and the other lady was quite clear. She was quite clearly channeling in a very, very dark energy in her own center. So her own center was obviously tailor made to this energy, but we was putting out positive energy, a light energy, and clearly she couldn't deal with that energy. She ran out literally. She almost collapsed as it happened. This woman wasn't coping whatsoever. So obviously she didn't expect this to happen. So this was probably a bit of a lesson for everyone, I suppose, on the day. Yeah. So I think for me, I didn't get a Reiki qualification out of it. I didn't get anything out of it apart from losing a bit of money. But I got an experience out of it. The negative energy that she was channeling in on, and she was putting a lot of effort in, I think. And she was obviously quite a powerful woman in her own way. But the positive energy that we were putting out was completely negated what she was trying to do. And in fact, she almost ended up collapsing, this woman. So I don't know what you think of that, Rob. Is that something what do you think that's about?
I've certainly not come across anything like that before. And let me reassure people that basically, all of the Reiki people I've ever come across are not like that. So if you go to learn Reiki, you're not going to have that kind of experience. So that's the first thing I must stress. And you're absolutely right. I'd use the analogy of, dark energy as opposed to light energy. It's like walking to a dark room. If you switch the light on, basically the light just removes the darkness. And it's the same. That's exactly what you were doing, because you already were able to channel energy, and you were putting out the strong positive energy. Then that would overrule, if you like, the dark energy that was there. But one of the things, going back to the Holy Fire energy, that makes that different from the Usui energy and traditional forms of energy healing in Reiki, is that the attunement process is done directly by the Reiki Master, and it's quite a convoluted process that they have to follow, and it involves sort of putting your hands on the people and doing various different things. It might take maybe 5 minutes or so for you to go through that process, and the energy is coming through the Reiki Master in the way that you described. Obviously not the right energy in this instance.
Yeah.
But with the Holy Fire, one of the things that sets the Holy Fire aside from different types of Reiki is that the Holy Fire attunement process comes directly from Spirit. So I initiate the process myself, but the energy is coming directly from Spirit. So you don't have the Reiki Master in the way. There's no sort of slowing down of the energy. There's not picking anything up from the Reiki Master if they've had a bad day. You're not picking up any negative energy or anything like that. You essentially get the most purest form of attunement that you can possibly get. And again, because it's coming down from Spirit, and because we're all individuals at different points on our spiritual, clearly for you already had the ability to channel energy anyway, whereas somebody else may not have. And so you'd be at two different places to start with. And so the Holy Fire will bring down energy that's appropriate for both people.
Right.
That makes sense. So that both get exactly what's right for them. And then there's no sort of, because best will in the world, one of the hardest things for us when we're learning Reiki is basically to get our energy out of the picture, to take our ego out of the picture. Like that lady, as you described her, she was trying so hard. So her ego was in it. Her own personal energy was in it. Whereas if you're doing Reiki properly, then you don't have to try. The hardest thing is to get out of the way and let the energy to flow through you.
Right.
And again, so from the Holy Fire perspective, all of that goes out of the equation, and the healing just comes straight from source, and the attunement process comes directly from source. So you're just getting the best possible outcome there.
Yeah, that's great. But I'd just like to sort of kind of put a little bit of a thing on the end of the story. I mean, I've met lots of Reiki people through my life. I'd say dozens, and 99% of them have been very, very positive, like yourself, Rob. This was obviously just a bit of an anomaly, but I wanted to sort of bring it up just to sort of demonstrate the sort of the darker energy, or the more base energy, I suppose, than the light energy. That really proves to me that like you said, Rob, that the dark can't exist in the light, but the light can exist in the dark type of thing. So but I say, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with Reiki. I've had a lot of Reiki done on me, and I've known a lot of people doing Reiki. And as I said, it's always been a positive experience, really. So for myself, and I think it will be for most people, because it kind of opens you up, doesn't it, to other things as well.
It does, definitely, yeah. Again, when I teach people, I make it very clear that originally when Reiki was taught, it was taught for people to be able to do their own spiritual development, their own self-healing, And again, when people think of learning Reiki nowadays, very often people think, I'm going to learn Reiki so I can become a Reiki practitioner and do it for paying clients, or I'm going to do Reiki so I can teach it to people. But that doesn't have to be the way. You can go right through to Reiki Master level with that perspective of healing yourself and using the Reiki energy to develop yourself spiritually.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rob, and I think as well. I mean, what a lot of people sort of kind of sometimes miss as well is that to be the best that you can be, you need to do the work on yourself first, really, don't you?
Yes,
obviously you're channeling in some energy, so if the channel's not great, it's not going to be great itself, I suppose, is it?
Correct, yeah. But again, that's another lengthy conversation, I guess. We're never going to be perfect in this lifetime. We can't get to a point where we are perfect to channel energy. So there's got to come a balance somewhere along there. But you're right. If we're really not well as individuals, then we need to heal ourselves first before we can use the Reiki to help other people. Great.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to just throw out there, Rob, or we can go to some questions. Have you got anything else you want to throw out before we?
We'll wrap up at the end, yeah. I say we'll wrap up completely at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So
let's do some questions. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a few comments here. So this one's just a statement, a comment from Tracy. She said, "I send negativity to the universe to be recycled into positive energy." So that sounds a very good process then.
Yes. Yeah, there's, like I said, there are a number of techniques that you can do. The main thing is that you're dealing with it. You're not just kind of chucking out of the window to do with it whatever. Yeah, I mean, sending it to the universe. A lot of people send energy to Mother Earth, for Mother Earth to sort of recycle that energy. We can use our guides and angels, etc. There are quite a number of ways in which you can do that. The most important thing is that we do make the effort to do something with it.
Yeah. On in relation to the person about the healing, I'll have to say that they weren't doing Reiki. They weren't Reiki people. They were just, I suppose, they were just like a self-taught, hands-on healer, I suppose. So they weren't using any Reiki. They were just putting hands on, flicking. Right. So it wasn't Reiki. So I don't want to sort of get people on the wrong track. I wasn't describing a person doing Reiki then. This was a person who just been, a hands-on healer. Realised that they could heal people, and it's almost like that's how they did it, because it's just they didn't know any better, I suppose, but it kind of worked for them. But like Rob, they wasn't getting rid of the energy probably in the right way, really.
Yeah, and like you said, so they've not had any formal teaching, and in no way was I knocking what they were doing. There's no judgment around my comments. It's just that there is a better way of dealing with that energy than just kind of chucking it out the window. Or worse still, you see from time to time people like throwing it in the room where they're working, and again, it builds up, does that negative energy. You don't want people walking through it and picking it up. So
it makes sense. And obviously the plants and flowers weren't right chuffed with it either, was so.
No, beyond not chuffed, eh?
No. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got so Jane's asked, how long does it take in a session for healing to work? I'm guessing this might be dependent, but is it, how long would a healing session take then if you were doing a Reiki session for somebody?
Okay. Again, there's no simple answer to this one, Jason. For some people, as you demonstrated with the migraine, 10 minutes or may be enough, and the healing may take place spontaneously. For other people, it depends how deeply embedded and entrenched the issue is that underlies, and that can take sometimes weeks to lift. For some people, it just might not shift at all. And as I see it, sometimes it can be a karmic thing that we come into a lifetime and we have to deal with a certain illness. We have to learn lessons from that. It's something that we'll know before we come into life that we're going to go through. And hence, obviously, when we live in it, it's not pleasant and we seek help. But then there are sometimes a reason why it won't lift. The other thing is that sometimes people, after a long period of time where people have suffered from something, it becomes a part of their identity. It's the type of thing where you meet somebody and every time you meet them, it's their primary topic of conversation. You won't leave around.
It's like the crutch.
Say again.
It's like their crutch, isn't it?
Yeah. And so for them, they might want some help with it, but deep down, subconsciously, I'm a part of them, and so they're not willing to let go of it. And so the way that I work when I see people in practice is that if I've not seen a definite within the first couple of sessions, then I won't take it any further because I know it's not the right thing for this person. That's not to say something else might work. And again, going back to the idea of the wellness centre that we've opened up, the idea is that it's a hub and we want to have healers of all different types come in there. So if one person can, then somebody else might be able to help you with a different modality. So that's the ethos behind why we've opened the hub up, really.
No, that sounds. I mean, I did a little bit of work at a centre going back a few years, and I remember a story from the lady who did the Reiki, and she was healing a lady with, I think she had certainly some very deep emotional issues, and the Reiki must have released something, and she had a really big emotional outburst, and it was really unexpected for her as well, I think. And a lot of people wouldn't expect that from something like Reiki, I suppose.
No, okay, so that's an interesting topic then, Jason, and I can see we've gone on quite a long while already, haven't we? So in terms of sometimes Reiki can have an unexpected effect on people. Again, I went to a session with this guy called Greg Braden in London. It was a 2-day seminar. And one of the things he was teaching about is the way that modern science starts to understand now how the body deals with trauma. So when we go through a traumatic event, we very often are not in a place where we can process that mentally. What happens is that the body releases like little particles, if you like. They're called neuropeptides, and they're basically they're released. And believe it or not, even though these are like microscopic things, they encapsulate the experience that you've just gone through. And these little neuropeptides, they go through and they'll find the cell receptor, and they'll link into that cell, and they essentially become a part of the cell. And they will stay there even for decades. So even when the cell replicates, it replicates with the cell. So when it's being rejuvenated, and this is why things like Reiki can help to free those things off. And what happens is that you might get a flashback of the incident that had happened, or you might get some of the emotions and not understand it. Like you said, that this lady had this emotional outburst. And so, again, this does happen from time to time when we're doing Reiki. And I'd see that as a good thing, because what's happening is that past trauma is being released from the body, so that person is being freed from that. So again, enormously good. Sometimes the same sort of thing, you can get like shooting pains in the body as well. And again, I'd see that as something that's been released, that's been let go of. So again, a very positive thing. But again, not necessarily what you'd think from what we were discussing before about Reiki being a lovely calming energy, a lovely peaceful energy. But it also goes to town and helps remove things like that.
Mm. Yeah, I think this was definitely a positive experience. It was just a release of a blockage, some sort of blockage release anyway. So I think definitely a good experience for her, really.
Yes.
Catherine's made a comment. She said, transmute negative energy to white light or return to sender with love. That's two things that she's mentioned there. I think they're both. So they're both.
Definitely,
I think they're both kind of some things that you might use, or some intention that you might use, maybe.
Yes, definitely. And as I work with the energy, I know that it transmutes the negative energy. So I don't have to throw the energy away anywhere. I know that the Reiki energy deals with it on my behalf. Yeah.
Great. David said,
how we work.
Yeah. David said, just David, just clarifying what we talked about, saying you raised a good point. The most important point is that you must work on yourself first. So I think that applies to anything, but certainly on spiritual things. If you've not got your own house in order, it's difficult to sort of help other people, isn't it, I suppose?
And again, I think a lot of people, sorry Jason, just to add to that, a lot of people that come into this field of work are people that have experienced big upheavals in their life, that they've been through a lot of trauma. And the really positive thing from that is that they can help the people because they understand how that trauma impacts people's lives, and they can help other people to get through the same sort of ordeals. Yeah.
No, I agree with. I mean, most of the people I know that do the healing or any of the therapies, a lot of them have been through stuff in the past, So because you've got to learn, you've got to be a bit of learning behind it, haven't you, as well?
Yes.
Okay, this is we've got another one from David here. He said, over the years on my Reiki journey, I found that once I had received a level 2 attunement, then I felt plugged into the world in high definition. That's quite a good explanation, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And again, I think until you've experienced it, and I think we experience it at varying degrees on our spiritual path, it might be one day that you go outside and the colour of the sky just sort of kind of takes you by surprise, or the colour of the trees or something like that. And I think that's what Dave is meaning. It basically is opening you up to experience life in a fuller sense. It's not necessarily as well just what you're seeing, but it's what you're perceiving and feeling energetically, etc. And suddenly can become a magical place, whereas previously it might have been, like hell on earth kind of thing,
That's good. That's great. He just added as well that, in his opinion, that he really recommends the Holy Fire Reiki and the Karuna Reiki as well. So to anyone who's watching, he's a big proponent of that. He recommends that as well.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so before we sort of wrap up, we've had a bit of kind of quite an interesting chat tonight. So just talk about your centre, and talk about what you do, Rob, and how people can get in touch with you and do Reiki or whatever, really.
Okay. If I can leave some links with you, Jason, we've got a website, so that kind of gives you some background into the centre. obviously just now the centre's not running in the way that it should do, but our vision for the future is that we'll have all of practitioners working from there. We've spent a few. Well, we've spoken to quite a number of people who work with people who have gone through trauma, and so I can see that being a feature of the hub. People for counselling and that kind of stuff, especially around things like child abuse. I know it's not nice to talk about, but there's definitely a need for healing there. And so this is what we want to use the hub for, is basically to have a number of different avenues that people can explore in terms of their wellness. The tagline that we've got for our business is basically, we're there for you on your journey. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We want to make it so that people can come here and then they can find one person or another that'll be able to help them. And as well, within the hub, then it opens up opportunities for teaching experts. So I teach Reiki on a regular basis at all different levels. And again, I love doing that. I absolutely enjoy doing that with people. And it's lovely to see how they change from the beginning of the course to the end of the course, and then how they change afterwards when we start making use of the Reiki. So I'm doing that on a regular basis. I recently, despite earlier in the year having a lot of resistance to it, I started teaching online, and my very first student was a lady in the US, and that was a phenomenal experience. I didn't know how it was going to go, but it went incredibly well. She was such a lovely person. You know, I meet some people I'm very privileged to meet because it's clear that they're very powerful healers, and just kind of a stepping stone on that journey as they develop themselves and they open up like a flower opening up, if you like. And so that I get an awful lot of pleasure out of doing that. And as well, the hub, we've got a number of artists who display their work there. We've got 8 different artists there, and again, they come from a spiritual background. Their artwork is beautiful, and we're working on our website so that we can advertise the artwork on the website so people can see that. But it's not just straightforward artwork. A lot of their artwork is energetic as well. So in the same way that you get energy from Reiki, then their artwork as well is putting energy into the rooms where it's being displayed, that kind of stuff. People comment very often when they come into the hub, oh, it feels nice. Even people who've no concept of energy, they say, oh, it feels nice in here, you know, and they don't understand. But what they're expressing is that they understand energy's there, and that it's good, you know. We also sell crystals as well. One of the things that I did want to say is that the experiences that we talked about on the Holy Fire experiences, I've got a YouTube video that people can play freely. There's no adverts on it and there's no charge for using it. And it allows people to just experience Reiki energy. If they've never had it before, it's a really easy way to plug into the Reiki energy. So I'll share a link with that with you as well, Jason, so people can try that out.
So people can have a watch of that as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
Great. So what's your centre called exactly, Rob? Just so if people want to Google it or whatever, or Facebook it.
Yeah, it's Kickstart Wellness Hub. Right. So Kickstart, one word, wellness, and then hub. And again, the idea, the Kickstart Wellness, it's the beginning of a process. You know, so many people are out there. Again, a lot of them have been through the same sort of thing before. You're looking for something to kickstart your wellness. And so, again, that's what we're there for, and that's why business is named like that. Having said that, my Reiki is called Reiki Unbounded. And again, the idea is that there's no limit to what Reiki can do. And I genuinely believe that. And the tagline for my Reiki business is fall in love with Reiki. And I love seeing people do that as they make Reiki part of their lives, and they just become fascinated by it because it's boundless.
That's great. Well, we've had some really good feedback on the comments. Everyone says found it really interesting and a wonderful discussion. So if anyone's watching, you can still share the video. People can keep rewatching it and keep sharing it. So if you want to find out about Reiki, then you can keep watching this as long as they want. So is there anything you want to say before you go, Rob? Or we've pretty much covered everything, I think, haven't we, tonight?
I think we have, but I would like to express gratitude. Thank you very much, Jason, for allowing me to do it. I was very nervous beforehand because I've not done anything quite like this. So thank you very much. And also thank you to the people who've been watching and listening. I appreciate your patience. We've gone on for over an hour and a half. Didn't know how long we'd go on for, but it's been a lovely flow of conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, well, no, thanks for coming, Rob. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I think it is a very interesting subject, and I think it's a subject that we could talk about probably for a lot longer, actually, as well. So,
yeah.
So for everyone watching live or watching on demand, if you like, with the latest technology, we're going to be here, all being well, every Wednesday with amazing guests like Rob. So we've got next week we've got a lady talking about Pleiadian channeling, which is going to be dead exciting, especially for me. Very, very drawn to the Pleiadians. That's very exciting. The following week we've got a lady talking about trauma and consciousness. So we've no idea where that's going to go, but that'll no doubt be fascinating as well. So keep sharing and tuning in. It'll be, and it's and spread the word. So we'll sign off for tonight then.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye.